Chapter 1. 2,000 Years in One Place. A forest stands between two rivers, the Niemen and the Dwina, and for 2,000 years, no chronicle troubles to name the people living inside it. No king writes to them, no priest counts their souls. History, as Rome and Byzantium understand the word, simply does not reach this far north. And yet, someone is here, cutting wood, salting fish, burying the dead under the same pines their grandfathers used. The proof will not come from stone or grave goods. It will come from words, borrowed by strangers who never once wrote the borrower's name. North of the forest live the Finns, not yet Finland, not yet a nation, only scattered hunters and fishermen strung along lakes from the Baltic to the Volga. Sometime before the Christian era, while these Finnish tribes still shared a common tongue, they began borrowing from their southern neighbors. Not a handful of words, something closer to 100, and every one of them names something ordinary. A fence, a wall, an axe, a sledge, a bridge, a bathhouse, beer, even the cap the men wore, the capure, crosses over intact, syllable for syllable. Two peoples who might otherwise have vanished from memory without a trace have left, in each other's mouths, a kind of fossil record, and fossils this precise can be dated. The borrowing happened while Finnic unity still held, which means before it broke apart, which means centuries before anyone thought to write either people down. Some of these borrowed words go further than fences and sledges. The Finnish word for sky, taivas, descends from the Lithuanian word for God, dievas, a whole cosmology folded into a single vowel shift. And Perkun, thunderlord of the forest people, crosses the linguistic border only to be demoted. Among the Finns, he becomes Perkul, their word for the devil. Rome notices the forest people only once, and only from a distance. The historian Tacitus, writing of the Aesti on the Amber Coast, records that they gather a resin they call glacum, and wear the tusks of boars as charms against their enemies. Talismans that work, he says, even for a man carrying no weapon at all. Under Nero, an equestrian is dispatched north for a shipment of the stuff, and afterward, the coins start arriving, first under Trajan, thickening through the reigns of the Antonines, a slow, bright trickle of Roman silver moving into a country with no cities to spend it in. Then, in the opening years of the 3rd century, the trickle stops. Not slows, stops all at once, as the roads themselves come apart under the first tremors of the age of migrations. Before the silence falls, one more power passes through and leaves its mark. For 3 centuries, the Goths hold dominion over these coasts, and when they are gone, almost nothing survives of that overlordship, except 2 words. But they are the right 2 words. Kingless, king, a title the forest people had never needed before and would not stop needing after, and a word for the sword, the weapon that came with it. Both words travel on into Slavic and Finnic alike. Proof that a single ruling elite once stamped its authority across 3 separate peoples in the same breath. And something else lingers. quieter than a loan word. A name. To this day, a Lithuanian calls his eastern neighbour a Gūdas, likely their own worn-down memory of the Goths who once ruled them both. Then the record goes dark. No more coins. No more amber ships putting in under Roman charter. A late chronicler, centuries removed and writing more from legend than witness, still manages one true feeling image of what the forest closed over. Men in wolfskin and bison head caps, boats sewn from rawhide and greased with tallow. A people living, in his words, almost like wolves in their own dens. Here is what remains once the coins go still and the traders you stop coming. Not a monument, not a grave inscription, not one sentence written by the forest people about themselves. Only the words they left lodged in other mouths. A Finnish sky, a Finnish devil, a Slavic word for king that started somewhere else. Bones can be misread. A bronze fibula can be traded, stolen, buried 100 miles from where it was forged, and mislead every archaeologist who finds it. A language borrowed wholesale, however, does not lie so easily. A people has to actually live beside another, generation on generation, before their word for beer becomes its neighbour's word for beer. Long before anyone writes a single line about this corner of the world, its presence is already being recorded, not in ink, but in the mouths of everyone around it. The last Roman coin slips from a trader's hand somewhere near the coast, and no one troubles to pick it up. It works its way down through leaf litter into the forest floor, and by the time the 3rd century turns, the trees have closed over it completely. Whoever still lives beyond that tree line will enter history now carrying nothing but a spear. Chapter 2. The Kingless. The spear rises first out of the marsh grass, and it belongs to no army. It belongs to a single man, standing thigh-deep in the bogs between the Niemen, the Naru, and the Biberza. In a country so wet and so wooded that no rider can cross it at a gallop. This is the land of the Yotvingians, and the spear is not just their weapon. Some say it gave them their very name. Here, spread across small fence farmsteads and low earthen ramparts, live people who answer to no king. Only clan elders, called up when danger comes, and put down again when it passes. For a while, this is enough. 10 Yotvingians will throw themselves at 100 enemies, hungry for the kind of glory that gets sung about afterward. And for decades the tactic works. Ambush in the reed beds, sudden and vanishing. But armies change faster than marshes do. When Prussian and Bortian kinsmen come to their aid against Daniel of Halich and his Poles, they arrive in time only to watch the dawn break over red shields, sunlit helmets, and lances standing thick as reeds themselves. They turn around and go home. Within a generation, the Yotvingian spear has stopped meaning anything against iron ranks like that. Then comes the famine of 1279, and the proud become supplicants. Envoys sent to Prince Włodzimierz in Volhynia, begging for grain, offering wax and beaver pelts and marten skins, and whatever silver they still hold. flotilla of relief comes down the Bug and the Naru, and Mazovian raiders fall on it near Putusk and destroy it before it arrives. After that, there is no more Yotvingian nation to speak of. A sorcerer chieftain named Skomont still terrorizes the Pinsk country on foot for a while, fast as an animal, until his head ends up on a stake. Then even the ambushes stop. Further north, along the same marshy frontier, live the Prussians, and history cannot decide what to make of them. Shipwrecked sailors washing up on their coast are not robbed but rescued, sheltered even from pirates. A poor man can walk from house to house and eat at any table without shame. There is no hunger here that hospitality doesn't answer. And yet the same households that feed a stranger will drown or sell their own infant daughters and burn captives alive as offerings to their gods. Chroniclers call them the gentlest of barbarians in one breath and shudder in the next. It is, in its way, one people, generous without limit and merciless without apparent contradiction, because to them the two things are not opposites at all. What held a Prussian world together in the absence of any king was the funeral. When a wealthy man died, his body was not burned right away. It lay in the house for months, sometimes half a year, while his movable wealth was spent feasting relatives and neighbors. And only when the goods ran out was what remained divided into unequal shares, set at intervals along a mile of ground and raced for on horseback, the fastest rider claiming the largest portion. Only then did the pyre take him, with his weapons, his clothing, his wives, his slaves. Singers called Tulishe and Legazi stood over the flames and did the real work of keeping the old faith alive, praising the dead man's raids, his vengeance, his devotion to the gods his sons were now expected to keep honoring. And at the height of it, the singer would lift his eyes to the sky and swear he could see the dead man riding there, mounted in shining armor, a falcon perched on his fist, leading a great column of ancestors and spirits into a distant world, and the mourners around the fire believed him. It took the order barely 50 years to erase 10 Prussian tribes from the map, not for lack of courage. The record is full of courage, at Kauno, in the marshes, on the stake. What no Yotvingian and no Prussian tribe ever built was a single hand strong enough to hold them together past one bad season, one betrayed flotilla, one dead chieftain. A people that will not bow to one man cannot outlast an order of knights sworn to exactly that. What survives of them now is not a wall or a shrine. It is a song sung at a graveside, describing a rider crossing the sky, the one thing this scattered, kingless world ever agreed to build together. Chapter 3: The Hidden Fire and the Invented Pope. The rider crosses the sky once, seen only by a singer who swears to it, and after him, the smoke that lifted him there has to learn a new discipline. It can no longer rise where anyone might see. Under the rule of the order, the old fires do not go out. They go quiet, pulled back into clearing the missionaries have not yet found. And for 200 years, a faith that once burned in the open learns to live as a secret kept in plain sight. The animals chosen for it are always black: a bull, a goat, a pig, a hen. Set apart from the herd the way a coin is set apart from ordinary silver. A blade opens a vein, and everyone watching waits on the blood. If it fails to spurt freely, if the bones or entrails show some flaw no one can quite name, the whole undertaking stops there. A war party turns back. A voyage is called off. In 1320, the lot falls 3 times on a captured knight named Hirschhals of Magdeburg, and twice the chieftain Mont frees him, remembering some old kindness done him in that German city. The 3rd time, the lot falls again, and Hirschhals himself asks to be tied to his own horse and burned, rather than live under the weight of having been spared twice by an enemy. 2 centuries later, in 1520, a man named Waltin Suplit offers a black bull in the open, with the blessing of his own Christian overlords, to frighten Gdansk ships away from the Prussian coast. And it works almost too well, because the fish leave with the ships. A second sacrifice, a black pig this time, has to go up afterward. An apology to gods who were never told to spare the fishing grounds along with the fleet. Meanwhile, the 2 faiths run side by side in the same households, and no one above ground quite understands what he is looking at. Duke Wietout, writing to the Christian princes who accuse him of caring too little for the church, turns the charge back on them. 200 years of Prussian rule under the order, he says, and the Prussians still keep their old rites under nothing more than the colour of baptism. A bishop of Samland named Michael spends his tenure trying to legislate the secret out of existence, forbidding the forest gatherings called Kreshe, the reading of omens in beer foam and hen bones, the wailing women who mourn over graves dug not in consecrated ground, but under the trees where the ancestors have always been laid. He orders the crosses torn down that families raise, unconsecrated, over those same forest graves. What he never seems to grasp is the logic underneath the one custom he condemns most. Parents bringing their baptized children back to running water and washing them there a second time. It is not defiance for its own sake. It is an attempt to rinse a foreign god's claim off the child and send it back downstream to whatever country it came from. Old names survive the same way, kept quietly beside the new ones a priest insists on. A son answers to Jan in church and to sermon everywhere else. It is out of this same fog of half-understanding that the grandest invention of all takes shape, not in the forest, but in the writing of the very men trying to stamp the forest out. The chronicler, Peter of Duisburg, describes a sanctuary called Romoa, ruled by a supreme pagan pontiff named Kriv, obeyed, he claims, by every tribe from the coast to the Lithuanian interior, the way Rome is obeyed by its own faithful. It is a magnificent picture, and it rests on very little. What actually crossed those borders was a crooked stick, a chrysoula, carried from farmstead to farmstead as a summons to gather, nothing more than a herald's staff mistaken by men eager to find a rival church to conquer for a throne. A god named Occupirmus enters the record the same way. A missionary's interpreter, asked what the Prussians called their highest god, answers honestly in his own tongue, Occupirmus, the very first, and a passing grammatical answer hardens on the page into a deity that no Prussian ever prayed to by that name. Here is the shape the whole record takes. Once it is looked at plainly. The conquerors could stop a rite, but they could not describe the one they had stopped, and where the true faith kept its silence. Something else always rushed in to fill the page. Two shadows fall from every suppressed religion, the secret it manages to keep, and the story its enemies invent to replace it. And for 500 years, Europe read the invention and called it the truth. The crooked stick still makes its round through the villages, farm to farm, gathering the people the way it always has. It is traveling east now, toward a hand strong enough to be real. Chapter 4. The Smith Who Forged the Sun. The stick has stopped travelling. Somewhere on the upland between the Niemen and the marshes, it has arrived at last, in the one hand strong enough to close around it and keep it. That hand belongs to Mindog. Rival clans that once ruled beside him are gone, one absorbed into his service, another exterminated outright until, as a Ruthenian scribe puts it with visible distaste, he rules alone in the whole Lithuanian land and grows so proud that he no longer values any man beside himself. He is baptized not long after, and Rome is pleased, and a crown is sent north to a king who now wears a cross in public. But the same chronicler who records the baptism also watches what happens when Mindaug rides out to hunt. If a hare crosses his path, he will not enter the brush after it, and he will not break so much as a twig that day, not until he has made his offering, quietly, to the gods who matter. He keeps 4 of them by name. Nonadiej, first among them, Telawel, Diwirix, and a 4th, the hare's own god, watching from the thicket he has just refused to enter. The bodies of the dead still burn in the old way, while the baptismal water is barely dry on his skin. Christianity, here, is a treaty signed with one hand, while the other keeps making the older promises. It is through hostile eyes like these, annoyed, unsympathetic, and for exactly that reason unlikely to have invented anything flattering, that a fuller world comes into view. And out of that same record comes something no missionary's guess could have produced. An actual myth, remembered almost word for word. A man named Soe kills a wild boar and pulls 9 spleens from it and gives them to his sons to eat. When he learns they saved none for him, he goes looking for the underworld himself and finds it only at the 9th gate, with his own son's help. His father receives him there and teaches him, without meaning to, how the dead should be treated. The first night, he beds him in the earth. Badly slept, so he says in the morning, eaten by worms. The second night, laid in a tree. Badly again, stung all night by bees. The third night, he burns him on a pyre. And in the morning, Soe answers that he slept sweetly, like a child in its cradle. The lesson travels outward from that single answer to the Yotvingians, the Prussians, the Livonians, everyone who ever laid a body on flame instead of ground or branch. Fire is not punishment. Fire is mercy, becomes its craftsman too. Teluel is a smith, and what he forges is the sun itself, not the shining god of southern myth, but a cold yellow lump of ore, hammered into shape and thrown into the sky to light the world, its glow having wasted itself unseen on the ground. Generations later, a missionary named Hieronym of Prague pushes deep into Lithuania and finds a people still worshipping an iron hammer of extraordinary size. He asks the priests what it means, and they tell him. Once, the sun vanished for months, locked away by the mightiest of kings in the strongest of towers, until this very hammer broke the wall and let the light out again. When Hieronym later fells the sacred oak at the heart of one such grove, the women of the district come to Witold himself, weeping. Their god's house has been taken, they say, and they no longer know where to beg for rain. What waits beyond death for a people who trust fire over earth or branch is a country called the Wele, cold, grey, ruled by ancestors on their own long bench, where an unmourned soul gathers crumbs fallen beneath the table. The living approach that border through Raudos laments without meter, wives and mothers demanding, sometimes bitterly, to know why the dead one left them. And at the very last, for the great houses, the border is crossed in fire, on a scale no less a household could afford. Olgierd goes to it in 1377 in purple and gold, with 18 saddled war horses burning at his side. Kigstut follows with his weapons, his hunting hawks, his hounds, the last of the great open pyres, though by then the law has quietly stopped feeding them living people. Here is what the enemy's pen preserved that no friend would have thought worth saving. A smith who beat the sun into shape, a man who chose fire over earth and was right to, a country that mourned its felled oak like a murdered house. Lithuania became a European power in these very years, and in the same years, almost by accident, its true gods were written down, not by anyone who loved them, but by witnesses with no reason to lie and no imagination left for decoration. West of the Niviaja, one stubborn country is still feeding a fire on every hill, refusing to let it go out. Chapter 5. The Last Fortress. The fire still burns on the height above the Niviaja, and here, in Samogitia, it has never once gone out. This is the last stubborn country, wedged between river and sea, without a single walled town to its name, only earthen ramparts topped with stakes, and forests thick enough to swallow an army that doesn't know the path. An army finds out anyway. On the 15th of July, 1260, the Teutonic Order rides into the marshes near Durban and does not ride back out. The worst single defeat the knights will ever suffer. Among the Lithuanians who help break it is Treniata, nephew to the newly baptized king Mindog, and he does not forgive his uncle's christening. He becomes the acknowledged champion of the old gods, joins the conspiracy that puts a knife into Mindog within the decade, and briefly rules in his place, before the dead king's own grooms cut him down in turn. Kings convert, kings die. The fire on the hill outlasts both. What resistance costs is paid when it comes in captured men. In 1320, the lot falls on Gerhard Ruder, Vogt of Samland, and the Samogitians dress him for it. The armor of 3 men strapped onto one body, hoisted onto his own warhorse, lashed to 4 stakes so it cannot bolt from the flame that follows. Wood is piled until horse and rider both disappear beneath it, and both burn together, an offering prepared like any other. The choosing, both times, is done by lot, not cruelty improvised in victory, but a rite. It cannot last, and it doesn't. 69 years later, in February 1389, a harder winter delivers the Comte of Quipeda into the same hands. This time, there is no horse. He is bound at the wrists and ankles to 4 birch trees. A ring of fire built around him, left to suffocate in the smoke before the flames reach him. In 1413, the king's men climb the height above the Niviaja and tear down the wooden tower that has sheltered the sacred fire for longer than anyone living can remember. They do not simply let the flame die. They rake every last coal out of the ash pit, carry the whole smoking mass to the riverbank, and pour it into the current, a precaution against pagans waiting in the trees for the royal column to leave, who might strike a spark from the embers and start the fire again. 3 years later, 60 newly baptized Samogitians stand before the Council of Constance with grievances against the order. The year after that, 2,000 of the country's leading men are baptized at once. On paper, Samogitia is Christian. In practice, the old world argues back. When the royal preacher Wężyk stands before a gathered crowd and describes through an interpreter how the world was made, a Samogitian in the audience interrupts him. How can this young man speak of creation as if he had stood there himself, when we have it from our own fathers that the world has simply always stood as it stands now? Even the king has to step in to settle it. What the fire leaves behind, once underground, can only be seen through the eyes of men sent in afterward to dig it out. And those eyes do not agree. Jakub Laskowski's notes, gathered on a tack circuit and dressed up decades later by Jan Wasicki for a Basel printing house in 1615, hand down a whole catalogue of Samogitian gods. Most dissolve on contact. The goddess Gabia, keeper of the hearth flame, turns out to be nothing stranger than Saint Agatha, whose blessed bread guards a house from fire. Where Laskowski invents, the farmer's own prayer against thunder needs no invention at all. A man walks out bareheaded with a flitch of bacon, offers it aloud to Perkin if his field is spared, and afterward eats the bacon himself. Jesuit missionaries working the same ground between 1583 and 1602 find something sturdier. Flat stones hidden under granary straw, tended with a holy black suckling pig, and 3 times 9 pieces of bread carried in by an old woman who still remembers how it's done. In 1600, a priest sets his axe to one last sacred oak, and a huge owl bursts hissing out of the hollow trunk. Every witness in the yard takes it, without a moment's doubt, for the devil himself. A faith can survive its own extinguishing. What it cannot survive undamaged is the long wait afterward, in hiding, for someone to come looking, because whoever comes will not see it whole. They will see a black pig, an old woman's counted bread, a name half guessed and half invented. And it falls to later hands to sort the borrowed saint from the buried god. The ashes go into the Nieuwejaar in 1413, and the current carries them north, past the last mapped village, toward a country no missionary has yet troubled to visit. Chapter 6. The Decipherment. The current keeps moving north past every mapped village, and here, at last, it opens into the Daugava itself, the great water, wide and slow, the border of a country the missionaries have barely troubled to visit. Beyond it lies Latvia, and in the year 1618, in a stretch of country so far from any church that its own priests have counted 3 visits from a Catholic collar in 70 years, something happens that has not happened anywhere else in this story. A Jesuit sits down with a dying world and writes down what it tells him. The man he questions is 90 years old, a village pop that his own neighbours point to as the keeper of the old ways. For days he refuses to speak. When he finally does, he lays out a universe with the patience of someone reciting an inheritance he never expected to be asked about. A god watches over the sky. Beneath him, a greater god of the earth. And beneath that one, a staff of lesser gods. One for fish, one for game, one for grain, one for cattle. The oak counts as male, and men set eggs beneath it in pairs. The linden counts as female, and women bring it butter, milk, cheese, fat. To the horse god men give coins and bread and a scrap of fat thrown into the fire. To the grain god, out in the fields, they lead a black ox, a black hen, a black piglet, and cask after cask of beer. The dead travel with bread at the head of the grave for the long road, a second loaf pressed into the right hand for the dog that guards paradise, 2 coins in the left for the ferryman. And every October, the month of souls, the dead are called by name into the heated bathhouse, fed, scolded for the year's misfortunes, then swept out with axe cuts notched into the house's 4 corners. It is a complete system, confessed almost reluctantly, and once it is on paper, it does something no one expected. It starts unlocking doors that have stood shut for 400 years of hostile chronicling. A horse god named Usin turns out, on close listening, to share his name with a refrain sung in Ruthenian carols. Ausian, Tausian, a scrap of holiday nonsense that somehow travelled as far east as the Mordvins, who still invoke it over their pigs. A cow goddess called Moshel turns out to be nothing older than a diminutive of Maria, worn down the way a name wears down in 100 years of peasant mouths. Farmers sing a whole litany in her honour, and Usins together, strong Usin of the horses, dear Marinia of the cows, Anthony down the list watching the pigs. And the pattern becomes obvious. The names are borrowed, sometimes Christian, sometimes just a fragment of song mistaken for a deity. But the functions underneath them are old and untouched. Names travel and get lost. What they are attached to does not. With that lesson in hand, the strangest wreckage in the record finally makes sense. A Goland legend, half remembered, tells of famine so severe that women were cut open for withholding the harvest in their own bodies. A detail so grotesque that generations of readers dismissed it as garbled cruelty. Set beside a Ruthenian chronicle of the year 1071, where two sorcerers walk the Volga during a famine, naming which women hold back the grain, the fish, the honey, and cutting them open in front of witnesses to prove it, and the Golad legend stops being nonsense. It is a documented rite, badly transmitted, and the Mordvins still perform its shadow today. A single knife stroke slitting a grain sack open at a housewife's back, spilling the loaves out for everyone to see. Elsewhere, deep in the country, an iron hammer of enormous size has been worshipped for as long as anyone can remember, and no one, before now, has explained why. Then a Danish chronicle surfaces, a prince named Magnus, sailing home from a raid around the year 1120, carried off trophies including hammers of unusual weight, called Jovian, taken from an island shrine, the thunderclap, given the shape of a smith's tool, because that was the only way an old mind knew how to picture a sound that loud, and the flat stones tucked under granary straw across the countryside, tended for reasons no one living could quite explain, match a Mordvin custom precisely. A small pit at the centre of every household, covered by a stone, fed with a little poured blood, kept for the spirit of the house itself. Nothing in this record was ever nonsense. It was a single system, seen through 5 chapters of broken glass, and one old man's testimony was the missing pane. Here, under the straw of an ordinary granary, is a flat stone that has waited generations to be read, the seat of a house spirit, the smallest temple built by any religion in Europe. Suddenly, after 4 centuries, legible again. Chapter 7. A religion. Running backwards. The stone is legible now, and men come from very far away to bend over it. Here, in the last years of the 19th century, European scholarship turns north toward Lithuania and Latvia, the way an older generation once turned toward India, certain that somewhere in these granary stones and half-forgotten rhymes lies the buried root of Zeus himself. Max Müller gets there first, or hopes to. Aging, still chasing the solar mythology that made his name, he pores over Latvian folk song, looking for something even older than the Vedas. Certain he hears the world's religious infancy still murmuring in its cradle. Hermann Usner goes further. He takes the Samogitian evidence and rebuilds an entire theory of the gods on it. First, he argues, there were only momentary gods. The thunderbolt itself worshipped in the instant it falls. A spear worshipped because a man swore an oath on it. Then these harden into departmental gods, small and precisely named. One for the door hinge, one for the first green shoot. Only much later, on this account, do a fortunate few of them swell into something like Zeus or Jupiter, gathering the smaller gods into themselves the way a river gathers streams. Lithuania and Latvia, Usner insists, still show the beginning of that climb. Rome shows it too, in its own priestly ledgers, the Indigitamenta, listing a separate god for manuring the field, another for the first sprout, another for nothing grander than a door hinge. Jakub Laskowski's Samogitian catalogue reads, at first, like confirmation. He counts off gods by the dozen. 2 gods of forest moss, 3 gods of lambs, a god who governs nothing but the pig, another who governs nothing but a whisper. There is a god who watches over the crosses planted on Christian graves, a servant, oddly, of the very faith that replaced him. Some entries are almost certainly nothing at all. A stray peasant exclamation, a diminutive of a saint's name, mistaken for a deity and written down as one. A later collector, named Veckenstedt, manufactures gods outright, of the tobacco pipe, the dumpling, the drunkard, inventions dressed as folklore. But set beside the actual shape of the record, the theory runs into its own evidence. Not one Lithuanian god in 4 centuries of testimony is ever shown in human form. No idol was ever carved. No temple wall ever went up around one of them. The gods lived in oak groves and river shallows, in stones under straw and fire on the hearth, and the pattern of the names tells its own story. The old opaque names go first. Andaj, Natrimpe, words no philologist can even translate, vanish along with the priests who alone remembered how to address them. What multiplies afterward are the small, transparent ones, a god named for exactly what he does, and nothing more. The same democratizing swarm that Laskowski catalogued. It looks, at first glance, like religion being born. Read the sequence in order, and it looks instead like religion coming apart. Great gods dissolving downward into the soil that made them. At almost exactly the same moment, a grand duke was gathering the whole country under one crown. Heaven, it seems, does not always climb toward its Olympus. Sometimes it comes back down the mountain. Only 2 things in that long sequence never fully dissolved. Perkun keeps his own name 1,000 years before any chronicler thinks to write it down. Finnish and Estonian both borrow it for their word for hell. And a Mordvin thunder god descended, centuries later, for love, exactly as Zeus once came down for Semele. The other is fire itself, so central to this world that a 14th century patriarch's letter labels the entire country simply the land of the fire worshippers. In 1394, a captive priest, held prisoner among them, records what that devotion could demand. 50 widows in a single village, hanging themselves after their husbands' deaths, so that it would be their bodies, not their living selves, that burned on the funeral pyres. Of true myth, almost nothing else survives whole. The smith who forged the sun, Sui and his 3 burials, the famine legend of the Golord women. What does survive, unmistakably, running under every later name and every borrowed saint, is a triad no neighboring people shares. Perkun in the sky, fire on the hearth, the snake coiled quietly in the corner of the house. No temples were ever built here, and so none had to fall. Somewhere in a Lithuanian forest tonight, the wind moves through the trees the way it always has, and a half-remembered rhyme still asks the black cloud, kindly, to pass over and trouble the neighbors instead. Whether that is memory or something still, quietly, alive, is a question the wind itself declines to answer. What is certain is only this: a religion that raised no monument left, in the end, exactly the evidence it started with. Words, still standing after 2,000 years. The script was based on the book Starożytna Litwa, Ludy I bogi, authored by Aleksander Brückner, and first published in 1904. Thank you for watching. Until the next journey begins,